These are very, very important matters which affect all of our constituents, and it is right that this House has, and quite rightly, a very keen interest. Any substantial policy developments should have been made to this House before being made through the media. I am glad that we're having a statement today, but it's not enough for this House to come second to the media, especially on subjects like this, which are of interest to all. When the House is sitting, important policy statements must be made here before they're made to the media, as required by the government's own ministerial code. In any event, I will always ensure that the House has the opportunity to scrutinise important policy announcements, and that the government may well find those opportunities are more frequent, more extensive, if announcements are made to the media first. And I would say I have the greatest respect for the Select Committee. I have a great respect also for the Secretary of State. But please, can we make sure in future it's done through here? And if, which I may believe, that if it was leaked and that you felt you had to respond, Secretary of State, please let us do the leak inquiry, because we've got a major colander right across government that I don't want to see again. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I personally, Mr. Speaker, give you my apologies. I actually refused every invitation for media, both yesterday and today. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement. Under Article 43 of the BBC's Royal Charter, I am required to determine a funding settlement for the level of the licence fee for a period of at least 5 years, from the 1st of April 2022. I am legally required to make my determination as far in advance of April as possible. I'd also like to highlight that this year the licence fee settlement has featured S4C prominently for the first time, in line with the recommendation from the independent review of S4C completed in 2018. The licence fee will be the sole source of public funding for S4C. Negotiations back in November 2020, they began back in November 2020, and both I and my predecessor have met with the BBC on several occasions during this period to discuss the settlement. As part of those negotiations, the Charter requires that I assess both the BBC's commercial income and activities and the level of funding required so that the BBC can effectively fulfil its mission and public purposes. In addition, this government has set out our own relevant factors to consider during the Charter review in 2015-16. Evasion, commercial income, household growth and industry costs. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister has said, the BBC is a great institution. It has a unique place in our current cultural heritage. And beyond our shores, the BBC broadcasts our values and identities all over the world, reaching hundreds of millions every day. Likewise, the Welsh broadcaster S4C plays a unique and critical role in promoting the Welsh language and in supporting our wider public service broadcasting landscape. However, Mr. Speaker, in reaching this settlement, I had to be realistic about the economic situation facing households up and down the country. The global cost of living is rising, and this government is committed to supporting families as much as possible during these difficult times. Given that climate, we had to think very carefully about imposing potential increase on the TV licence, particularly given that any increase would expose families to the potential threat of bailiffs knocking on their door or criminal prosecution. When it comes to monthly bills, this is one of the few direct levers that we have in our control as a government. And in the end, Mr. Speaker, we simply could not justify putting extra pressure on the wallets of hard-working households. Every organisation around the world is facing the challenge of inflation. I simply do not believe that those responsible for setting household bills should instinctively reach into the pockets of families across the country for just a little more every year to cover those costs. So today I am announcing that the licence fee will be frozen for the next 2 years, and that it will rise in line with inflation for the following 4 years. The BBC wanted the fee to rise to over £180 by the end of this settlement. Instead, it will remain fixed at £159 until April 2024. That's more money in the pockets of pensioners, in the pockets of families who are struggling to make ends meet. Mr. Speaker, we are supporting households at a time when they need that support the most. And this settlement sends an important message about keeping costs down while also giving the BBC what it needs to deliver on its remit. This approach to funding will be the same for the BBC and for S4C. However, I can also announce that S4C will receive an additional £7.5 million per annum in funding from 2022 to support the development of their digital offering. This is a 9% increase for S4C following 5 years of frozen funding. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this is a fair settlement for the BBC. It is a fair settlement for S4C, and most importantly, it's a fair settlement for licence fee payers across the United Kingdom. And let's not forget, the BBC will continue to receive billions in annual public funding, allowing it to deliver its mission and public purposes and to continue doing what it does best. And to support the BBC even further in what is a fast-changing broadcasting landscape, the government will more than double the borrowing limit of the BBC's commercial arm to £750 million. This will enable the BBC to access private finance as it pursues an ambitious commercial growth strategy, boosting investment in the creative economy across the UK. But as Tim Davies said in his first speech as Director General of the corporation, the BBC must be a simpler, leaner organisation that offers better value to licence fee payers, and we agree with this. Ultimately, the settlement strikes the right balance between protecting households and allowing broadcasters to deliver their vital public responsibilities, whilst also encouraging them to make further savings and efficiencies. Mr. Speaker, the licence fee settlement is only one step in our roadmap for reform of the BBC. In the last few months, I've made it clear that the BBC needs to address issues around impartiality and groupthink. Those problems were highlighted definitively by the recent Sirota review, and the BBC's own leadership rightly recognised those findings in full and committed to deliver all of the review's recommendations in its 10-point action plan on impartiality and editorial standards. And I have had constructive discussions with the BBC about these issues in recent months. But the BBC now needs to put those words into action. It needs to convince the British public that those changes are in fact being made and to provide regular and transparent accounts of its progress. We will shortly begin the mid-term review of the BBC's charter, which will consider the overall governance and regulation of the BBC, and a key part of that review will look at whether the BBC's action plan on impartiality has in fact materially contributed to improving the internal governance of the organisation. But it's also time to look further into the future. Mr. Speaker, as any serious commentator will tell you, the broadcasting landscape has changed beyond all recognition over the past decade. We're living in a world of streaming giants, of on-demand and on pay-per-view and smart TVs. Technology is changing everything. 97% of homes already have super-fast broadband. A family in Cumbria can stream 5 different movies in 5 different rooms in its house at any one time. And our gigabit rollout is transforming those networks even further. Over 65% of UK households now have access to the fastest connection on the planet. As the tech has changed, so have audience habits, particularly amongst younger viewers. So it's time to begin asking those really serious questions about the long-term funding model of the BBC and whether a mandatory licence fee with criminal penalties for individual households is still appropriate. As we have said before, we will therefore undertake a review of the overall licence fee model, and those discussions will begin shortly. Mr. Speaker, the BBC has been entertaining and informing us for 100 years, and I want it to continue to thrive and be a global beacon in the UK and in the decades to come. But this is 2022, not 1922. We need a BBC that is forward-looking and ready to meet the challenges of modern broadcasting. A BBC that can continue to engage the British public and that commands the support from across the breadth of the UK, not just the London bubble. A BBC that can thrive alongside Netflix and Amazon Prime and all of its other challenges which attract younger viewers. The licence fee settlement represents a significant step in that journey and in our wider reform of the BBC. I look forward to continuing working with the BBC and others across the industry over the coming years to secure the future of these vital British services. I commend this statement to the House.
I now come to the Shadow Secretary of State, Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I completely agree with you that it's a disgrace that announcement of this importance was not first made to Parliament, and I look forward to the leak inquiry that you mentioned as well. May I take this opportunity to congratulate the Secretary of State for coming top of the teachers' pet list. She was the first Cabinet Minister to tweet support for the Prime Minister. She was the first to volunteer to do a broadcast round. And now she's been the first to throw up a distraction and in finding someone else to blame for the Prime Minister's disintegrating leadership. The BBC's reporting, of course. The licence fee deal must be fair to fee payers, whilst ensuring the BBC can do what it does best. There should be no blank cheques. However, the government claims this is all about the cost of living crisis. I mean, pull the other one. What is it about the £13.57p a month that marks it out for such immediate and special attention to address the cost of living over the £1,200 a year increase in energy and household bills, or the £3,000 a year taxes increases that her government has imposed? Is the licence fee really at the heart of the cost of living crisis? Or is this really about their long-standing vendetta against the BBC? Now it's part of Operation Red Meat to save the Prime Minister from becoming dead meat. Apparently, negotiations with the BBC hadn't even been finalised when the Culture Secretary gave the details to the Sunday newspaper on the very weekend the Prime Minister's position was most in peril. I leave it to you and others, Mr. Speaker, to judge the timing of that. She has proven today the Conservatives may know the price of the licence fee, but not its value. The last time they targeted it, the over 75s paid the price. So what assessment has she made of the impact of this 2-year freeze on BBC output and commissioning and on the wider creative industries more broadly? Is she happy to become the Secretary of State for repeats? But this isn't enough. Oh, there's more coming, there's more coming. We've got lots of fun to be had with this, don't worry. But this isn't enough red meat for the Culture Secretary. She won't stop until her cultural vandalism has destroyed everything that's great about Britain. Vandalism is exactly what it is: to tweet on a Sunday with no notice, no discussion or thought, the end to the unique funding of the BBC altogether, without any clue as to what will replace it. So perhaps she will explain how the BBC will continue valued services that just wouldn't be commercially viable. First, how can it continue to support local journalism where so many have recently failed? In many areas, the BBC is the last local news desk standing. Second, how would a commercial-only BBC be able to play such a crucial role as it has done to levelling up and growing the creative industries across our regions and nations, from Cardiff to Salford and elsewhere? They're silent on that one. I support the increased funding for S4C, but they claim to support the union. So what assurance can she provide for the continuation of distinct broadcasting in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland when there's no licence fee? Third, would her cutback BBC be able to continue with the World Service and its global soft power, which her government's review only last year described as the most trusted broadcaster worldwide? Would it? Finally, what would happen to BBC Learning, Bite Size and children's educational programming, which frankly did a much better job than the government did of getting high-quality education into children's homes during lockdown when they couldn't even provide an iPad? The impartiality of the BBC is crucial to trust in it. By explicitly linking the charter renewal to the BBC's editorial...
Order. Quite rightly, I wanted to the Secretary of State in silence. I expect the same respect to be given to the Shadow Secretary of State. And those voices that I keep hearing, I know who's behind the mask, so let me reassure you that if you want to go out early, don't let me help you on your way. Lucy Powell.
I actually know that the honourable member is a big fan of mine, but he's just trying to hide it behind his mask secretly. The impartiality of the BBC is crucial to trust in it. By explicitly linking the charter renewal to the BBC's editorial decisions, the government sounds more like a tin pot dictatorship than a healthy democracy. The BBC creates great quality, British-produced programming, from royal weddings to Strictly Come Dancing to Great British Drama and championing of new music. It's at the cutting edge of harnessing the digital age. Of course it needs to change with the times and review its output and reach, but it is a well-loved, trusted British treasure. It is the envy of the world. But the government is in trouble, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister is casting around for people to blame, and the Culture Secretary has stepped up to provide some red meat. Well, it won't work. This is not how the future of our jewel in the crown and the cornerstone of our world-leading creative industries should be determined. She will have a fight on her hands if she wants to destroy it. Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think there are about 30 questions in that statement, so I'll try just to address the top points. So, first of all, Mr Speaker, it is nobody's intention to destroy the BBC. In fact, I completely agree with the Honourable Lady, it is a beacon. But the BBC licence fee is not a small amount of money for families who are working hard across the UK, struggling to pay that bill or face bailiffs at their door or a court appearance in a magistrate's court. Who are we to say it is a small amount of money? That is a disgrace. It is a significant sum. It is also regressive. Whether you are getting by on a minimum wage or on a multi-million-pound presenter's salary, you fork out the same amount of money. That is not right. Only those who haven't faced hard choices on what they can or can't afford for their families on a weekly basis would claim that it was a small amount of money. And as a point of principle, we cannot add to that bill at a time when every family is facing pressure on their wallets. So would the Honourable Lady like to indicate from a sedentary position, does she support freezing the licence fee for 2 years and helping those hard-pressed families. Does she support it? Is that a no? She's shaking her head. So the Honourable Lady does not support freezing the licence fee to help those hard-pressed families who need every bit of help in the face of rising global energy costs and rising pressures on inflation. The Honourable Lady has declined to help those hard-working families. And, Mr. Speaker, what we are saying is that moving forward, we need to decide and discuss and debate. So bring it on, everybody in this House. Let's discuss what a BBC in 2027 will look like. It is not a policy. We're announcing a debate and a discussion. Let's all get involved positively.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Can I say to my right honourable friend that I'm not impressed by either the process or the proposal, and I don't think it necessarily leads to progress either. I'd be grateful to know whether there's an assessment of alternatives when they were put to Cabinet subcommittees, when the Cabinet considered this proposal, and why it is that this is the one thing where a government minister will claim that you can't have any kind of increase because of people being short of money. Other things that government run are linked to RPI or CPI. It seems to me that it would be better to have a discussion in this House as to whether we should have a moderated increase during the remaining years of this charter, and also that if she didn't say this is the last time there's going to be a charter with a subscription, could you please put the options in front of this House so that people like me who say if the choice is between the United States or the state, public broadcasting for the BBC and Channel 4 is better, in my view, than having everything go to some of the big media people around the world who won't maintain the kind of BBC which we've had for the last 100 years.
So, Mr. Speaker, the decision as to what the future funding model looks like is for discussion. It's not. It isn't even. Some of us may not even be here by the time 2028 arrives, but it is up for discussion, and that's what we need to decide moving forward. And I have the greatest respect for the Father of the House. He knows that. I've known him for 20 years. But I honestly cannot agree with the point that the BBC can just year after year after year continue to ask for more money from the British public. I just do not agree with that premise. I'm afraid that the BBC do not be under any illusion. They are going to continue to receive billions of pounds, even under this settlement, £23 billion over the course of this charter to 2027 of public money. We cannot justify, in the face of rising inflationary pressures, increasing global energy prices, we cannot go to the British public and say, pay more, and if you don't, a bailiff will be on your door.
Spokesperson John Littleson.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker, and thanks also to the Secretary of State for advance copy of the statement. Not that we needed an advance copy, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State shared her thoughts with Twitter, plus ça change. Now, we all know the timing is to distract from the Prime Minister. The Secretary of State claims that this move will protect pensioners from court cases. This argument, of course, is disingenuous nonsense. It was this Conservative government which abolished the automatic free licence fees for the over 75s. If pensioners are struggling with the current BBC fee rate of 43 pence a day, imagine how they'll cope with the cost of a Netflix Sky subscription model. Everybody knows it, less programming at a greater cost. Now, the Secretary of State has spoken about exploring the options for the BBC, but in reality, I suspect her mind is well made up. She let this slip in the Select Committee when she said to me, and I quote, "How do I even know if the BBC is going to be going in 10 years' time?" Some custodian of public service broadcasting. The hostility towards the BBC and its future does not stem from a desire to protect pensioners, but rather from a visceral loathing of the Prime Minister's critics. Now, the Tory right hates the BBC almost as much as it hates Channel 4, That's why the Culture Secretary, a doting Prime Ministerial loyalist, is so determined to destroy both. She doesn't want to see Krishnan Gurumurthy, lead presenter of Channel 4 News, or Nick Robinson, a former chair of the Young Conservatives, no less, and now lead presenter on the Today programme, pin the Prime Minister or his slippery apologist down. Mr. Speaker, she knows, does she not, that the Tory right wants the broadcast media to be as sycophantic as most of the print press, offering fawning adulation to their leader. If the BBC is felled and Channel 4 privatised, free speech will be the victim, and we know, don't we, Mr. Speaker, that the result will be yet more obsequious, unquestioning news.
Mr. Speaker, I have no idea how anyone could make the leap from let's have a debate and a discussion in this House to how the future funding looks to privatisation. It's just, I have no further comment.
We now come to the Chair of the Select Committee, Julian Knight.
Mr. Speaker, speaking strictly personally, I welcome the freeze and the overt commitment to wean the BBC off the licence fee. As Lord Grey said on the Today programme this morning, nearly £160 is nothing to Gary Lineker, but it's a lot to our constituents. But I and the House would like more details, please, as to whether the licence fee will stop in 2028 or be phased out. The latter, in my view, gives the best chance of preserving the BBC's status in our national culture. And how is moving to alternative funding models going to work, given, first of all, the paucity of broadband coverage, old technology like Freeview being embedded in the system, and whether central government funding, which has been muted, could stand up legally and also measure the key issue of impartiality?
So, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his comments and his support on the freeze. I just have to take issue with the paucity of broadband, though. 97% of homes in the UK have superfast broadband, and that's in. And as I said, 97% of homes have superfast broadband, and we are rolling out gigabit. In fact, if you're in a house in Cumbria, you can download, as I said in my mistake, five videos, 5 movies in 5 different rooms in the house. So we don't have a paucity. And with regard to whether the licence fee will be phased out, what a future funding model will look like, those discussions, that analysis hasn't even begun. But everybody in the House is to be part of those discussions, should be part of those discussions, and will be. And I imagine that the DCMS Select Committee will be doing some very important work on this moving forward in terms of establishing a future funding model. And it is work that will continue in the future.
Clive Efford.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Secretary of State say what impact assessment she's done that tells her about the impact that this change will have on households if the fees were increased, and also what the impact is going to be on services provided by the BBC as a consequence of these freezes in their income, on top of the 31% that they've had cut from income over the past 10 years, and how that will affect the services that are provided by the BBC, and how will they survive her plans for the BBC?
Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, we've been negotiating with the BBC over, both I and my predecessor, over a considerable period of time. The BBC will be meeting its mission and core purpose, and in terms of impact assessment, I think the most important impact assessment is that fewer families will end up in a magistrate's court.
Amy Green.
Like many of the best things in this country, the BBC licence fee is something that may not work in theory, but works really well in practice, shown by very low levels of evasion. There are, of course, many alternative ways of funding it, but as the Select Committee that my Right Honourable friend referred to concluded last year, the government either needs to come out with a strong alternative to the licence fee that it can put to Parliament, or strongly support the current model for at least the next charter period, 2028 to 2038. Does she have that alternative on offer?
I thank my friend for his contribution, and we must. I'm afraid we differ in our opinion, and I think we have 5-6 years. That is plenty of time to decide what a future funding model would look like.
Lloyd Russell Moyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We abolished the radio licence fee in 1979 and moved to a TV licence fee. So I myself am not against moving towards an internet licence fee or something like this. But we need to know the details, the thresholds, the amount of money that will be raised from those things. Does the Secretary of State accept that her announcement that this would be the last licence fee, without going through the consultation first, was reckless?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, in 2027 or 28, when it starts, many of us may not even be here. We're talking 6 years away. I welcome my honourable friend's contribution. I look forward to him being part of the discussion and debate about what we do in the future.
Brian.
The State will know that the Select Committee report that my honourable friend from Ashford just referred to acknowledges its very first recommendation that government will need to act to ensure public service broadcasting remains sustainable in today's global media marketplace. So, in that sense, I'm really glad that we're having the debate, even if I am a little unclear as to where it came from this weekend. So could I ask my right honourable friend, given that report is also clear the government need to have this credible view on what an alternative to the licence fee might be, and indeed we say what their vision is for the future of public service broadcasting, could I just ask my right honourable friend, what are her instincts as she kicks off this welcome national debate?
So I thank my friend for his contribution, and my instincts are let's start the discussion. Let's have a look at this is what I'm starting, Mr. Speaker. Unless, of course, members of the House would just like us to decide and not have the debates and not have the discussion. But that's where we're going. We're going to start that discussion. We're going to start that. Well, the Honourable Lady is speaking from a sedentary position, Mr. Speaker, which maybe she'd like to say and confirm. Does she support the freeze to the licence fee? Does she support a yes or a no, a nod or a shake would be great? No? There you go. We have it there. No.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. Despite the removal of the free licence fee for over 75s being a result of her own party's actions, the Secretary of State's tweet yesterday indicated that her attack on the BBC was due to the over 75s being threatened with prison sentences and bailiffs knocking on their doors. Yet, less than 2 weeks ago, she told this House that no enforcement action has been taken against anyone over 75 years of age. I know, Mr. Speaker, that the Secretary of State would not make such claims without the evidence, so can she please now share with the House what data she found to support yesterday's comments?
The Honourable Lady drew a direct link between two different parts of my tweet, and there is no direct link. It's just one of many reasons why I want to look at how we fund a great British institution moving forward in the future.
Freeze the licence fee. However, the conversation over the future of the licence fee is far from over. What steps will the Secretary of State take to protect the BBC's local services, the services that those who pay for it watch and enjoy, before the knives are sharpened within the BBC?
So the conversation hasn't actually started, and that's and my own friend makes local radio is a very important point. Someone made the point about local BBC news coverage. And I would just say many of us in our constituencies used to have lots of independent news coverage as well in the past, which is no longer there, which was, some may say, the dominance of the BBC locally helped to contribute to that. But we haven't, and I would urge my honourable friend, he has some very important points to make and experience in local radio. I would urge him to be part of the discussion and to help us frame what it would look like moving forward.
Growing up, my cousins overseas always told me they listened to the BBC when they wanted to know the truth. And I now represent somewhere known as BBC Borough. There's that many ex-employees, including myself, around. So could you tell all of us, where exactly was this in the Conservative manifesto? Because already people are seeing it as just a distraction for Partygate. And also, as someone who I remember seeing, I have fond memories of her in my constituency on reality TV on Channel 4. Does her trashing public service broadcasting apply to them too? Because that's a great Thatcherite innovation.
Excellent question. I'm not going to conflate Channel 4 with the BBC. I'm here to talk about the settlement of the licence fee. But, the second part of the question got me, I can't remember the first part. But there was no, she made a really important point about the BBC World Service. And the BBC will be able to, with the billions of pounds and the billions of funding, £23 billion it's receiving, still be able to meet its core mission and purposes.
Be right.
Speaker, my right honourable friend must be right that the BBC can't stand still while the rest of the world moves along. But would she accept that when we think about the future funding of the BBC, we have to consider both the content that is marketable and which is going to be commercially successful, and the content that is not, but which will act as the beacon she describes, not just to this country, but to the rest of the world in quality broadcasting and news and current affairs content in particular. And isn't that kind of content likely to continue to need subsidy in any future funding model we design?
So thank you for that contribution. He's absolutely right. One of the things we don't want is for all of our TV, which is streamed into the UK, to come from overseas. The discussion and the debates that we have about the future funding formula are going to have to include how we both protect, preserve, create great British content. And that has to be part of the debate moving forward. Can I tell about elements? No, I can't, because we haven't even begun the discussions yet. What modelling is there? There are a number of ways that I've been told already that we could look at funding the BBC moving forward. Well, it's not for me to decide. So we have to. It's not for me to decide until I have all the information and all the evidence.
Amy Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I just say to the Secretary of State, I wish I had the level of broadband coverage that she talks about in my constituency.
You're not alone.
When I was a councillor, a member of the Highland Council, I had to be very careful of the BBC because their reporting of all I said and did was very thorough indeed. And that was good for local democracy. Can I also say to the benches opposite that the coverage of the Scottish Government has been very thorough, and in the time of the Scottish independence referendum in 2014, it was so thorough that it reduced the then First Minister to near apoplexy, members will recall. So, a slimmed-down BBC may not be able to deliver this sort of service that's good for local democracy and for Scottish democracy. Could I ask the Secretary of State how she intends to make sure that we do not lose out on that front?
Well, democracy, particularly local democracy, is at the heart of a lot of what the BBC does. And that's why it will be an important element of conversations that we have moving forward, and an important contribution. And as I've said a number of times, the discussions, the debates which we will have in this place, the evidence that we will take moving forward, it hasn't begun. We're 7 years away. That's the consultation that we will have here, the evidence that we will gather here, the debates and discussions that we will have. Those discussions will start shortly. We're talking about a new funding model which will start in 2028.
John Whittingdale.
My right honourable friend will be aware that last year the number of TV licences purchased fell by 700,000, and that more and more young people are now saying that they don't need to watch the BBC because of the enormous amount of choice through the streaming services. Does she agree that even despite that increase in content, we will still need public service broadcasting in the BBC, and therefore it is right to have a debate about the future funding model, not to undermine the BBC, but to ensure that it can survive going forward?
I thank my friend, and that was my response to my earlier question. How do we keep good content, great British content made in the UK? The BBC is a national institution. How do we maintain the BBC? The question is not, do we or don't we have a BBC? The question going forward is, how do we fund the BBC moving forward? I know my honourable friend has made some interventions of his own and ideas of his own. I look forward to him furthering those moving forward.
Can I just say, many of us will find it nauseating that Minister comes here to talk about hard-pressed families when she supported a £20 cut in universal credit. But it's interesting that the Minister wants to come to this, I'm sure, in terms of objectively the fullest information. So could we test how much she considered some of these factors, maybe in the style of the broadcast media? So could she tell us how much more money is generated per pound by the investment in the BBC? Is it £1, £2 or £3? She talks about the North. How much impact, economic impact, is actually beyond London of the BBC? Is it 10% or 20% or 50%? Maybe she could just demonstrate her knowledge, at least, of the impact of the BBC now.
So, Mr Speaker, the specific figures across the UK I will write to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. 11 years ago, the then Director General of the BBC said the corporation would have to do fewer things better. The current Director General has set the organisation the challenge of prioritising how it spends its money and maximising its commercial revenues. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that reform is necessary for the BBC to thrive in the digital age, both in terms of how it works and how it's funded?
Thank my honourable friend for his informed question. You know, we can't ignore the fact that our digital landscape is transforming rapidly and that we are advancing at a huge pace, and that has resulted in people changing the way they view their viewing habits, the way they view their content, and particularly the younger generation. That is why we would be dinosaurs if I stood here and said, I would be accused of being a dinosaur if I stood here and said, we just let it go on, we just let the BBC carry on as it is, and we just assume that into the future we will carry on with this licence fee model. And as my honourable friend has highlighted, 700,000 people fewer bought the licence fee. We have to do something now in order to sustain the BBC and to maintain the British beacon that we have in the BBC moving forward. We have to act now to ensure that the BBC remains the BBC and it's here for the future.
Sammy Wilson.
Speaker, can I welcome the fact that at long last we have a minister who is prepared to grasp this nettle and to tackle the BBC poll tax and also stop the enforcement of payments by people who are angered by the bias of the BBC, and also force that organisation to look at its own bloated expenditure, and especially given that broadcasting is now changing to allow people greater choice. I hope that despite the cries of outrage from the BBC bodies in this House shall not back down on these issues.
I thank my honourable friend for his support, and I think it's just worth making the point that the BBC will continue to receive billions of pounds of funding, of public support and funding between now and 2027.
Sir John Redwood.
Will she decriminalise the licence fee to take the pressure off magistrates' courts? Shouldn't this be a household bill like others?
So it's something that we are keeping under review, and I would say as part of the discussions moving forward, you know, a model for the BBC of a licence fee paid by individuals with the potential threat of bailiffs or criminal prosecution is just in today's age, really. Is that how we're going to continue moving forward? And it's an important question and one that will be part of the discussion.
Green.
The establishment of the BBC in Salford, neighbouring my constituency, has created many excellent jobs for my constituents and has been both an economic and a cultural driver of success in the North West. But that isn't what I wanted to ask the Secretary of State about. Can she say what guarantees she can give to the BBC's excellent, world-class, salaried orchestras, like the BBC Philharmonic, whose concerts I've had the great privilege to attend as their guest?
So, Mr Speaker, The BBC, as I've said, will continue to receive billions of pounds worth of funding. It will continue to meet its mission and core purpose, but I can't dictate how the BBC spends its money or have any editorial control. It's up to the BBC how they decide that they spend their licence fee settlement.
Alan Cairns.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement and to recognise the priority she has placed within it on Welsh language broadcasting and the importance that it has on the Welsh-speaking community in Wales. In supporting her statement and in helping the BBC achieve its objectives under the new settlement, will my right honourable friend call on the BBC to follow other public sector organisations, improve their transparency and to publish every invoice in excess of £500, just like every other organisation?
Well, S4C plays a vital role in supporting the Welsh economy, culture and society. This funding will support S4C in reaching more Welsh language speakers, including younger audiences. And I'm very sure that S4C has just heard what he said, and I will certainly take his points back.
Laurie Vaz.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Let's talk about value for money. Will the Secretary of State agree with me that 43 pence a day is value for money for BBC iPlayer, BBC Sounds, BBC World Service?
It's billions of pounds. And I don't believe that if you asked any family who is receiving repeated letters or a bailiff knocking on the door or a request to appear at a magistrate's court would think that it was value for money because it's money they can't afford. The issues that working families and those who are hard-pressed in the situation that we have with rising inflationary pressures think it is difficult to pay £159 a year out of their income, which is why we're freezing that money for the next 2 years and not allowing it to rise.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's statement because household bills are under pressure, and I think it is reasonable to freeze the fee for 2 years. In the whole of the conversation, Mr Speaker, and outside of this place and in this debate, we talk about television and we talk about the streaming services. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that when the conversation takes place, we will have to make sure that the very important radio programmes across the board of the BBC are protected and are still funded, and we can't just compare it to a Netflix Apple model because radio is such a key part of the BBC's output?
It absolutely is, and I think it will be a key part of the discussion. And you know, you mentioned, I think it was Apple and Netflix, and it's not the BBC's role to compete in a competitive way with other providers, but radio is certainly a huge part of the BBC and will be a huge part of the discussion.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Over the generations, people all over the world, some in fear of their lives, have huddled around their radios, straining to hear the words, "This is London," because they trust BBC World Service News. Given that a subscription service will never work for airwave radio, what assurance can the Secretary of State give those listeners and the House that the BBC's service to the world, which is the BBC World Service, will be able to continue to do its job?
Well, my own friend has jumped the gun in mentioning the words subscription service. I haven't mentioned subscription service. I've said that we need to have a debate and a discussion about how the BBC is funded moving forward in the future. And I completely understand his point, but how the BBC spends its money that it receives via the Charter is the BBC to decide how it spends. We don't have any influence over that.
Andy Carter.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State is absolutely right that we should be debating and discussing the future of the BBC. She mentioned in her statement two of the important elements of the Charter: to entertain and inform. Of course, there is a third one as well, to educate. And that is the area of public service media that is most difficult to commercialise. Can she assure me that she will ensure that that element of the BBC is protected going forward?
Well, I hear his point, and I think a lot of people agree with him, and people have talked about the bite-sized contribution that BBC made during the pandemic, which is absolutely vital to many families who were homeschooling children at home, and I will bear his comments in mind and take them back.
Debbie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree with me that having shown in the past week that the government has shown contempt for the British people, today's announcement on the BBC shows they treat the British institutions with contempt as well?
No. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last Friday, I introduced my private member's bill to abolish the BBC was to be read a second time. Unfortunately, there was not enough parliamentary time to proceed. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I publish quite a lot of private members' bill, and sometimes I get some support and sometimes I get some opposition. Getting rid of the BBC licence fee, tens of thousands of people supported it, and very few were against it. So can I thank the Secretary of State for coming to the House today and make a statement? And if my bill is any use to her, I'd be very happy to change in committee any of the stuff I have there at the moment.
Thank you, and I look forward to that.
Kevin Jones.
The Secretary of State has come to the House today to basically say the freeze in the licence fee is to help hard-working, struggling families. Can I ask her, though, could she answer the question that was put to her by the Father of the House? When was this decided? Did it go through a Cabinet subcommittee? Did Cabinet sign this off? Or is it that just over the last weekend we thought we'd come up with something which would take the attention away from the Prime Minister?
Yeah, Cabinet has signed it off. These negotiations have been going on with my predecessor as well as myself. I legally had to make my statement in as much time as possible before April, which is why I'm making it today.
Hugh Merriman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I often find those who are best placed to give their view on whether we need the BBC or not are those that have lived, worked, travelled abroad and haven't had access to the BBC. And therefore, I applaud the constituent that's written to me, having done just that, and said the BBC needs to be celebrated and maintained because he sees what a future looks like in this country without the BBC. Can I ask the Secretary of State, given that inflation is expected to rise to 6% in the early parts of this year, what elements of conversation she's had about which content will be reduced as a result of this decision that she's making today?
So I thank my friend for his contribution. Can I just say that I ran a school in Africa for a year, and I understand the value of the BBC World Service because I was a listener of the BBC World Service for a whole 12 months. And therefore I, having lived in Africa and run a school in Africa for a year, also know the importance of the BBC. And it's why I've said all along this discussion is not about do we have a BBC or don't we? It's about how do we maintain a BBC moving forward in a rapidly changing, modernising landscape? How do we fund the BBC in that event? So that is what the discussion's about moving forward, not whether or not there is a BBC.
Kirsty Blackman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm no fan of the regressive licence fee, but the Secretary of State saying on Twitter that this will be the last licence fee announcement is discourteous to this House, it's discourteous to all of the many people that watch and listen to BBC, and it's discourteous to all of those who are employed by the BBC. How does she believe that the 50 BBC employees based in my constituency are currently feeling because of the announcement she made on Twitter over the course of the weekend?
Mr. Smith, I think on Instagram I add to it's likely to be, because I cannot see a world, and I don't think many people can, see a world in 2028 where individual households are paying an outdated funding fee that was established in 1922 to fund an organisation that I don't think anybody could ever have seen what the digital landscape would be like today, or the viewing habits of young people today, or indeed what the opportunities will be in 2028.
Matt Morman.
Speaker, in some ways the BBC is the best of global Britain, but in a globalised media landscape we know that there are people prepared to pay for Netflix, for all those subscription services and for web services and for all the multitude of things the BBC offers. Isn't it daft that someone would suggest that she should stand up today and say even from 2028 to 2038 you have to pay for the whole lot whatever you want?
Yes.
So, and it's to my, and I thank my friend for his contribution and for his contribution to the department for the time that he was there, and he's absolutely right. It's to the point that it's not about Do we have our great British institution of the BBC, which is globally recognised? That's not the question. The question is we live in a different world. People have different and changing viewing habits. And that, by the time we reach 2027, is going to be even... We can't even... I know when I started some of the negotiations, when my predecessor started some of the negotiations on this, TikTok didn't even exist. You know, we're moving rapidly to a different place, and that's why we have to have the debate.
Tulip Siddiq.